In the last hour, the Israeli military has announced a pause in fighting in 3 areas for humanitarian purposes. Now, this is the scene looking into Gaza from Israel. The IDF says starting today, between 10 a.m. and 8 p.m. local time, there will be a pause in military activity in Al-Mawasi, Deir al-Balah and Gaza City every day until further notice. It is to allow the safe passage of United Nations and humanitarian aid organisation convoys. Now, Egyptian TV has shown these pictures of aid trucks lining up at the border before moving off, driving towards the Gaza Strip. The Israeli move, which includes opening so-called humanitarian corridors, comes after mounting international pressure and warnings of mass starvation of Palestinians in the territory. The Israeli military says its planes also dropped 7 packages of aid into Gaza earlier this morning, containing flour, sugar and canned food. The IDF released these pictures of that, but the aid agencies say the method is inefficient, dangerous and a distraction. Israeli troops have boarded a boat that was trying to bring aid to Gaza by sea. The pro-Palestinian Freedom Flotilla coalition said the vessel, Handala, was intercepted in international waters. Video footage showed activists on board with their hands up as soldiers took control before the feed cut out. Let's go live to our Middle East correspondent Amir Nader, who's in Jerusalem, and our Gaza correspondent Rushdie Abaloof, who joins us from Istanbul. Amir, if I can start with you, what do we know about this breaking news of these pauses in fighting in some areas of Gaza?
Well, the areas that they've announced are areas that the Israeli military has previously told Palestinians to go to, areas such as Al-Mawasi, which is a huge tent encampment home to thousands of Palestinians who've been displaced there throughout the war. So these are already supposed to be areas that are safer areas than elsewhere in Gaza, where the fighting is supposed to be happening at a higher intensity. I think the more significant element of this statement is the announcement around humanitarian convoys. Humanitarian agencies have said one of the issues that they face while trying to bring aid into the Gaza Strip is that their convoys are often attacked by the Israeli military, and then they struggle to get permissions to deliver that aid. When they do get it, it's unsafe for the civilians that crowd around it. We saw deadly incidents this weekend and last weekend. So if there's going to be a safe route from the borders of Gaza through to the humanitarian areas such as Al-Mawasi and the areas where Palestinians are, that could indeed actually have a significant effect on the ability of Palestinians to access aid in Gaza.
Yes, it is interesting. The statement from the IDF says this was coordinated with the United Nations. We've also seen early this morning airdrops by the Israelis. That's right.
I mean, I think critics might say that that will do more to sort of have a comms benefit for Israel than an actual impact on the humanitarian situation on the ground. What humanitarian agencies say Palestinians need is for the Gaza Strip to be flooded with convoys of aid trucks, not 7 packages dropped from the air. Obviously, Jordan is looking at doing some airdrops too, with coordination with the UK after approval from Israel. But humanitarian aid agencies say that airdrops are not the solution. They're ineffective, they are dangerous. Gaza's not far away, it's not a remote territory. They just need to allow many more trucks to be delivered inside the Gaza Strip.
Amir, you mentioned the communication side of things. How much do you think what Israel is doing over the last 24 hours is because of that mounting international pressure and the pictures that all of us have seen coming out of Gaza?
VO now. Here's where it gets emotionally complicated. Imagine needing multiple layers of coordination just to deliver basic food. Would you trust your safety to that kind of system if your child hadn't eaten in days?
I think it's under huge pressure internationally, amongst its allies, amongst the international community, the aid community, and clearly it wants to be seen to respond. And I guess what we're trying to analyse is whether the responses that it's announcing will actually have the kind of effect that the humanitarian community are calling for. In the statement that Israel put out yesterday evening, they actually denied that there's a starvation crisis in Gaza. And they said that they want to enforce these changes in order to refute the false claim of deliberate starvation. So we're in this weird position where Israel is saying it's going to make some changes to the delivery of humanitarian aid in the Gaza Strip, but at the same time saying that there isn't a crisis.
Amir, for the moment, thank you. Let's go to our Gaza correspondent, Rushdie Abaloof, who is in Istanbul. Rushdie, I know you have your family, some of it in Gaza, and you talk to a lot of people there. What is the situation like at the moment?
Well, look, people hoped for a better permanent solution, but they, in general, they welcomed the very few people who have access to the social media were posting all night and this morning that this is a good move. At least we will, some food will be allowed in. The airdrop last night was a chaotic scene. I've seen videos and pictures of people fighting each other. I mean,
This moment is raw people punching each other over canned food. The human cost isn't just visible, it's screaming at us. If you're watching this, ask yourself, is this a failure of logistics or a failure of humanity?
punching each other to take some of the food. This is just show you how desperate the people who are starving for the food. 5, 6, I think 7 packages were counted in the north west of Gaza area called As-Sudaniya, near the Gaza city, where we believe maybe 200,000 people are living in tents in the area. Most of them were evacuated from northern Gaza and eastern Gaza, where there is active Israeli military operation in the area. So the people, all eyes are on the border, and people are waiting for the food to come in, because what has been allowed in the last week, which consider the most difficult week since the beginning of the war, people are waiting for the aid to be in and to be distributed, not to be sent to the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, where people walk I mean, for hours, sometimes to get to a very dangerous area. About 1,000 people were killed there. People were all the time demanding that food should be handed over to the UN agencies and to be distributed to the people. Well, I think it is very early to judge whether the amount allowed will be change the crisis, but it's a good move considered by all Palestinians.
Yes, because the aid agencies say they have those trucks at the border, and we've seen pictures of them moving from Egypt. But it is that issue that we mentioned with Amir. It's about the safety of getting those supplies in.
Yes, because, about 60% of Gaza now are under Israeli security control, especially the area where the crossings that is allow food in, like Kerem Shalom crossing in Rafah. The entire city of Rafah is under Israeli control. There is active troop inside it, and there is fighting every day in that area. So the trucks, the humanitarian, aid agencies always concerned about the safety of the drivers in the trucks. They need a multiple coordination to enter Rafah first, and then to go to the border and collect it. And they need another coordination to go back to the areas and distribute it. We understand that they might allow food from 3 different crossings today, one in south, one in the north, and one in the middle. So what is the agencies in Gaza are saying that at least they need a 500 to 600 truck every day for at least a month to ease some of the crises related to the food and water. And most important, not only food, they need medicine for the hospitals, and they need fuel to be able to run the essential operations in the hospitals in Gaza.
I know this is a difficult question, Rushdie. Is there any optimism amongst the people that you speak to on a daily basis there?
Well, it's hard to find any level of optimism in Gaza, especially after about 48 hours ago, when the American envoy Steve Witkoff announced that the Americans and the Israelis are walking away from the ceasefire talks in Doha. People were hoping that after months of suffering, the ceasefire will come into place. The people enjoy a relative calm back in January. For about 57 days, Israel used to allow hundreds of trucks every day. The markets were somehow stable, and people could start, at least to feel a little bit of relief. Optimism is something very hard to find in Gaza, but there is always hope that this step will be like a small step considered by them, but could lead to a bigger step or a permanent ceasefire that end the war.
Rushdie, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it. Rushdie talking to us from Istanbul, of course, because Israel does not allow the BBC or other international media into the territory at the moment. Our world news correspondent Joe Inwood now looks at the aid situation and a warning it does contain distressing images in this report.
Zainab Abu Hali was just 6 months old when her parents buried her, killed not by the violence of war, but by the malnutrition it has brought to Gaza.
She got also a bacterial infection and sepsis, so she was unable to swallow, and she was dead yesterday. Came to the hospital as a body because of severe starvation.
There is growing international awareness and anger at the scale of the humanitarian crisis. Of the nearly 60,000 people who have now been killed since the start of the war, 127 died from malnutrition. That figure increased by 5 in just one day, according to the Hamas-run Health Ministry. To try to tackle the crisis, a series of airdrops have been announced. The UK has said it is coordinating with Jordan to take part, as it did last year. These were the scenes then. But airdrops face logistical challenges. In the last round of aid flights, the US Air Force said each plane carried around 12,600 meals. This means it would take 160 flights every day to provide just one meal a day to the population of Gaza. Now, the combined transport fleet of the UAE and Jordanian Air Forces who would carry out the drops is only around 20 aircraft. Airdrops could deliver just a tiny fraction of the aid that trucks could.
VO, let's break this down. 160 flights a day, just to meet the bare minimum, and yet we're relying on 20 planes. That's like trying to fill a swimming pool with a teaspoon. Is this aid or optics?
And that has led to this blunt assessment from a leading aid organisation.
There's an obvious solution in Gaza, which is to open the borders and allow agencies like the IRC, like our partners in the UN and humanitarian organizations, to bring aid in and to distribute it as we would do in any other crisis on. Aid drops fundamentally are a grotesque distraction from that priority. We need access, not airdrops.
But the issue of access has been a source of intense argument. Late last night, Israel announced the opening of a series of humanitarian corridors to refute what it called the false claim of deliberate starvation in the Gaza Strip. But its critics will see it as an admission of the scale of the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, which they say it has caused. Joe Inwood, BBC News.
Meanwhile, here, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, says the UK is working with Jordan on plans to airdrop aid into Gaza and to evacuate children in urgent need of medical care. Our political correspondent Ben Wright has more.
Well, the horrific situation in Gaza has, of course, caused huge international concern, and that has mounted in recent days. On Saturday, Keir Starmer spoke to the German Chancellor and the French President. The three leaders said that they were appalled by the situation in Gaza, again called for an immediate ceasefire, and again urged Israel to lift all restrictions on aid flowing into the territory. We also know the UK is going to be increasing its contribution and help towards a Jordanian effort to airlift food and medical supplies into Gaza. The UK is also going to be starting a new scheme to try and evacuate a relatively small number of critically injured children in Gaza to the UK. I think there have been 2 transfers so far. The charity behind this wants 30 children to be brought out from Gaza and evacuated to the UK for treatment as quickly as possible. Politically, of course, here there is intense growing pressure on the government to do more. In particular, recognise a Palestinian state. 221 MPs from across the House of Commons signed a letter urging the Prime Minister to follow France's example. France has said that it will recognise a Palestinian state when the United Nations meets in New York next month. So far, though, the government is pushing back on that and holding its long-standing line that a Palestinian state can only be part of a long-term solution to conflict in the Middle East. Although the SNP are saying that as soon as Parliament is back after the summer recess, they're going to be pushing for a vote on that question in the Commons. But this is occupying a lot of thinking in government at the moment. And of course, Keir Starmer is meeting President Trump tomorrow, Monday, in Scotland for talks. And Gaza will, of course, well, I'd be surprised if it didn't, feature in their discussions.
Ben Wright.